you.
With what? With the anybody but Robo. It was totally me. Oh, that's fine. I don't even really use MySpace or Facebook, so really, whatever you guys forward to me,
no, I didn't forward it to anybody. That's the funny thing. That's just on my page. Damn stupid I did. I was gonna have t-shirts and buttons. Oh, Nikki, you've been missing Evan so much. Yeah.
Good, how are you?
A lot better.
Good, I'm glad.
I am missing out on a lot. I'm trying to catch up right now. Oh, no good.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, I'm behind. I'm working on it.
I'm glad you're back.
Projected is without constant supervision of club advisor, which would be the fault.
What's up, Rachel?
Nothing much.
That's fucking sweet.
I'm gonna get home.
So yeah,
I'm
that's why
hungry.
I kind of grudgingly held on to the reservation. That's awesome. I'm so happy. I'm working on that. Just got back. Yep. There's a lot of things that also about the highway permits because normal piss off the university. It's not like the person is, well, rich HSU pot. A reasonable curse off. So to go with the unreasonable curse.
Until 5:30 Monday, Thursday, and on Friday they're open until 5.
We took it down and they changed the size of it.
Yeah.
I told us a lot before.
We were out cleaning the freeway, this is our ass, our fucking sign isn't even on.
It's against us. Either no one has ever read our before.
that one,
Do you want me to address this?
I'm going to bring this up in a meeting and I didn't want to like
Okay, just just flip through that one. Okay, so we're both gonna agree that we're gonna interpret it differently, so that I'm guessing already that we're not to.
Here's one.
He'll be oversent.
Don't ask Nikki to run. There's one.
Hey, what's up, bro?
Nikki was asked to run by our general manager. Everybody just grounds for being fired.
Everybody took
So if you guys want to lie about all these things that are going on here, act like these aren't the deals that are
Can I
going on.
ask you what you guys think?
As in
So I'm
you,
lying.
Joan, Steven. Yeah.
Okay, what did I
You're sitting here saying that this is something that should supersede our government code, disregarding our code, our constitution, pretending that staff should be an office holder. It doesn't say to run. I've read all this. You've taken one little thing and trying to run it. You guys are violating Laura Romero, which is a misdemeanor, which is on tape. You're violating Laura Romero, which is a misdemeanor, which is on tape.
I'm going to ask you to stop right now. Because I have to tell you exactly.
You're the person who's responsible right now, and I noticed that since everyone has talked about all the propaganda that's been going on and about how Steven and Joan free it off, I know you guys are pretending that, oh, it's okay that Tyler and Tara and Crystal and Rob and Joan are all friends and hang out. So you can pretend that you're a room full of people, but this is some democratic process and that you guys are just doing it by the code. Nothing is coming from the code. These are the lines.
Hey, Jesse, sue us.
I'd like to...
You're gone.
Sue us.
You're gone. Do you have internet?
Yeah.
Could I borrow it from my partner?
It's over, so it doesn't matter. It does not matter how it turns out, because y'all are gone.
It doesn't matter. What do you do?
How about this?
It's only got a little
How
bit of
about
battery
this?
left for
She
about
sent
10
us
minutes.
an email. She sent us an email telling people not to contact Jason's attorney using her job, influencing people, which is totally wrong.
Deal with those issues.
You slandered people, you've had stuff stolen out of my
Is
office.
AS important to inform members of AS on ways they can get around
What are you doing?
the slander's campaign clause?
I don't know.
You and Harry were sitting in front, right next to me when you did that, Tara. The day of the debate, Harry said, and I quote, I need to tell people not to vote for Robo. I need to get out there and tell everybody not to vote for Robo. And your response was, you can't say that because that's the slanderous complaint. But what you can do is get around it like this. I don't understand in front of me, you guys are both members of AS.
We're the ones.
And if I have a person,
We're the ones.
I'm trying
So, good luck with having this be a good foundation. When you totally let it be known.
She was asking you for your advice. She was telling you what she was doing. Then you turned around and you said, no, don't do that. Do it this way so you can't get in trouble doing it.
well, you know what? That's, I hate to break it to you, but that's important.
I have respect for the students. The students. That's
How to
why.
get around the rules? As AS president,
You
you're
thought-
telling people how to get around code?
You're
You're AS president above being a student.
You guys are totally doing things inappropriate. You're violating the law, and then you're trying to spin it around. So you guys can keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, but I
All
will
that
pull
stuff
the code
is
and I'll find ways
you
to
guys
tweak
have
it.
obviously done things that are not according to
Dude, that was exactly what you were doing. You
the
said
rules
it.
of this organization have blatantly violated the law.
But I should be sitting up there.
Because you're out.
You know what? That's right. I am. Just ask to see a nice, strong president in office who can actually deal with all of you guys.
I would like to see a legitimate president in office. It's not. This isn't about Robo.
You got
This
three of
isn't
them
about
sitting in
Robo.
front of you, so
No, we should have had
respect the
two
motions
of
of this
them.
board.
We should have had two of them. The fact that there's a revote is completely unconstitutional.
One more option.
It's unconstitutional.
Wait.
Yeah. What part?
I'm giving everyone Valentine's this year.
If you're a student before you're a member of AS, why can you get knocked out of AS for missing meetings for classes? If you're a
That was
student
the
first.
face. That was the face value.
Like-
Being blown out of proportion.
Say that again?
Well, if you're a student, and this has nothing to do with anything, but if you're a student before you're a member of like government,
Yeah.
and your
it's double standard.
responsibility is to your academic achievement as a student before it's to the student government,
Yeah, we're students before we're student leaders.
then
I
how do
guess.
you how do you get deemed, how do you get kicked out of AS or get in trouble for AS for fulfilling your student obligations for us, i.e. a conflict in schedule?
Are you referring to Jason Robo's
No,
impeachment?
well, no, I'm referring to, I have a class from 2 to 3:20. So I need, when I get into office, reconvene, I need to switch things around. This has nothing to do with Robo. Everything that I nothing to do with him. This is, even my complaints have nothing to do with him, more than that.
Right, and it's just a similarity with what happened with him.
Yeah,
That's why I asked. Well,
so my question is, how do you...
there was plenty of time at the beginning where we determine our meeting times. We are all students first. We all have very different schedules, and I don't know if you've ever tried to coordinate getting. I don't know
Yes,
how many
I
people.
have.
How many? And so you know it's
Yes, I
difficult.
have. It's very
Oh,
difficult.
we have one.
It's
Game
manageable.
quorum. So we're gonna call the meeting back into order at 6:51 p.m. So we had just gotten done reading Jason's formal complaints. Jason now has the opportunity to explain them.
Public comment.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Public comment in regards to Jason's complaints. Thank you. Dina, in regards to his complaint?
In regards to his, what is it, 10-6 university staff shall not manipulate, was it influence, coerce, it might be 10-7, I'm trying to do it off my memory.
Yes, it is.
Okay, coerce, manipulate, or influence student voting. I understand that we're in completely uncharted territories and everything is new for the election commission. And I understand that the place that you're going to want to go for advice on how to act and how to proceed would be university staff members and administration. But I think that there's a definite conflict of interest within the university administration, and whether knowingly or not, the election commission has allowed the university staff to manipulate colors or influence student voting. And I just wanted to throw that out there in regards to Jason's complaint.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I came today because it's obvious to people in the student body that there's some sort of huge corruption going on as far as the elections and that sort of thing that has recently been held. Additionally, we think that this corruption shows that it goes through all levels, you know, so that it permeates into the elected people in AS and that sort of thing. This is really true when you stop to think about the way people have been unhappy about funding and President Richmond and the CSU and plans for budget cutting and that sort of thing. So this is just, this occurs to us, you know, it shows as being obvious to anyone who wants to stay informed that the current administration at HSU is being heavy-handed and trying to carry out their own political agenda. Jason Robo seems to have been singled out by President Richmond and Vice President Butler and that sort of thing, and they were trying to get rid of him. And by standing up, this whole thing, standing up for himself, this whole thing erupted, you know, and so we get little bits and glimmers of the truth of what has come out. But it's obvious that there has been widespread election abuse in this election. And so I wanted to suggest that perhaps what we need is a cooling off period, get people to whatever it is, you know, if they want to run for student office and have a new election.
Any further public comments in regards to Jason's complaints? Jessica.
It's okay for people to have interpersonal relationships, and that's a lot of what Jason's talking about. It's just really, it's extremely insulting to people's intelligence to act like we're not all interconnected. You know, people are speaking like they're non-biased folks. We know that our secretary, Crystal, Tara, they're all close, Joan's close. That's a group of people, and that's okay. But let's not pretend like it's not true. Tony's talking like he's not biased when he's been managing and helping out with Sophia's campaign. There's animosities between some people that shouldn't be happening. But the idea to pretend like we're just, you know, what is it, about 15, 20, 18 random people in a room, it's really insulting to all of us. It's insulting to the process. I think there should be more friendships, more relationships, more interconnectedness, so we can all work together to benefit students, which I honestly believe is what our job is to do. It's very frustrating that this keeps going and divulging into personality things, this, that. Our code and what several things that were mentioned. Staff, faculty, administrators are not to influence special issues. This is not something that's in our code. Therefore, it is a special issue. A special issue that the only thing, it's like so funny because it's like a schizophrenic dialogue. It's like there's not even a response to the concerns that are coming up. We've almost gone through damn near the whole entire election code where these are all problems, and it feels like there's this implication that like we're just, you know, flying Maverick and making stuff up, and the only thing that has been told that this is the process that should be happening is references to stuff. No one has, the only reference has been, oh, well, minimum academic qualifications or CSU policies. There's been no one who has read anything about an election, associated student government, how that's conducted in election form. And the only time that there was mention was when Rachel Rodriguez, our CSSA person, said, hey, I called the chancellor's office and they said there's no policy regarding votes. And it also says specifically that the commission has 3 days to rule on the eligibility of a candidate. In the letter that was referenced by a staff member in this conversation talked about, was saying, okay, well, this is how it has to happen, and that Stephen Butler did that. Stephen Butler did not do that. Stephen Butler came in here, talked, convinced Joan to talk, convinced several other people to talk, influenced, and then you guys voted on it. So they're using your name as election commissioners, as the election commission as a whole. Staff and administrators are using your name to do their dirty work. If Stephen Butler wanted to pull somebody off of the election, this is exactly what Jason is talking about.
Can you just point out a specific one? Because
I have one sentence.
Okay.
Let me finish my thought. I probably forgot it by this point. This is ridiculous, ludicrous. There's nothing that has been addressed that deals with elections. It's being made up as it goes along. This body voted last week. They are using the election commission as a name. If the administration wants to pull someone off a ballot, they need to quit hiding behind student government, making up things and policies that do not exist. Not one person on this commission has brought forward anything in writing that talks about our elections and policies that go forward. I'm asking sincerely as a student and as a member, respect our code and constitution, or at least don't attack people for bringing up almost our whole entire code and constitution to address our concerns, and then act like, you know, we're way out there for wanting to adhere to our code and our constitution. That's the only thing we have, and that's what we're supposed to be using to make these decisions. So I would just ask you to make your decision based on the AS code and constitution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just really quickly, everything that I've heard so far, I have not heard a single code that deems him ineligible, and numerous upon numerous codes that deem him eligible. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I mean, Luke seemed to be able to make a little public comment when he did his section, and I was actually going to read a couple other people's comments, and it wasn't going to, I'm not gonna go into this, but I would like to make a public comment and be a conduit for other voices.
Okay. Just a real quick point of information. Right now the commission is hearing the complaints, so it might seem like there's overwhelming complaints but no response back to a specific code. I plan on, after hearing the complaints, I plan on going through code and constitution and bylaws to respond to them. So that's just a general comment. So that's probably why, just in your observation, you haven't heard any response from the commission.
And then can we respond, or are you just going to end on that note and say this is how it is?
No. We're not going to just end on the note.
Okay. Thank you.
Jason has the floor to read. Please specify who you're making your public comments for.
Yeah, sure. These are emails that were sent actually out to the Elections Commission. They're Luke's. There's mine. Oh, here we go. Constance Mitchell's current Student Affairs VP says, in response to concerns raised by Ryan Guy, which I'll get to in a minute, in addition to the arguments that have been provided, the letter that was sent, she wanted to address that she knows right now is a really hectic time. It is for all of us. And I'm picking up the feeling that these complaints are being pushed aside for that reason and not for their merit. Instead of the issue being thrown under the rug, it is the organization's main purpose to provide a responsible and effective participation in the governance of this campus, to be an official voice for student voices to be represented, to protect the rights and interests of individual students in the student body. If these complaints are not addressed in a formal setting, then we as an organization are not doing our job. I urge your concerns to be addressed. The students have a right, and we owe it to them. Thank you, Constance Mitchell. And then that was actually within the time period of the 2 days that followed. Tara Holloway, graduate student rep, also had comments to say in response to Ryan Guy, which I probably should have read first, but I'm still going to keep going in this order. Thank you, Ryan. I formally want to add to this debate and say the following code 4.11, the Commissioner shall immediately hear all infractions, quarrels, disputes, and disagreements involving campaigns and elections and refer them as deemed necessary to the Elections Commission for ruling. She says, I do not feel that there has been an immediacy of action that has occurred on the Commissioner's part to adhere to the code, 17.06, which Luke previously referred to. I understand that many people feel this to be a done deal, but I implore all parties to re-examine the concerns being addressed and provide through the Elections Commission our designated body to go to in case of this sort of an issue. Thank you, Tara Holloway. And then Ryan Guy, the comments were made off.
Jason, I never asked you to make a public comment on behalf of myself.
These were things that were sent out to the Elections Commission and candidates, and I feel it's all public record. It doesn't state anywhere within the email that it shouldn't be shared and that it was confidential.
Well, an email isn't public record when it's sent to a group of people. First of all, this is a public comment section, and unless a person asks you to make a public comment on their behalf, you don't have the right to do that.
2 executive members and 2 council members, one being myself, asked you to send that out on behalf of students. So that wasn't just your thing being sent out on your own. That was me, Rachel, Tara Holloway, Constance, all asked you to sign out that email on behalf of us, which I do appreciate. So
it's not. It was in the capacity of a public official, and I feel that somebody shouldn't be able to say they're unpublic at some point when they're using their title.
Well, it's not a matter of that. We shouldn't even be having this conversation.
You guys said there would be no dialogue back and forth, so just...
Point of order, don't perpetuate it then. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead, go forth, and because it's not a public comment, and specifically to the agenda item that we're discussing right now, and his point of privilege, or power privilege, whatever he said, personal privilege, that he asked not to read that, but yeah, so.
So what was that? That was just like a...
So that means you can't read it.
I can't read it. Okay, I'll check on that later to see how legit that was. I seem to be getting a lot of practice doing that lately. Anyways, and I've got a letter from, what's her name? Shannon Taylor. Hold on. Let me just do some weird thing on it. Sorry, I just gotta bounce between emails. Alright, here we go. I'll try and keep this shorter and to the point without going into every aspect. Shannon Taylor says her and her husband both voted for me online early Thursday morning, and that my name was not removed from the ballot. And so if I was disqualified, why wasn't I removed? Also the point Tyler made on the Jack comments, or no, in the Jack, his comment was about how he wants to be fair to students because, quote, how many of these students, or how many of these votes would have gone to Sophia is retarded. She was a write-in candidate. Her name was nowhere on the ballot. She was unmentioned, so how many of your votes would she have got? None. I began a response late last night, and then this is the following response. It's an attached file. Shannon Taylor also wrote a piece about the impeachment in the paper you guys could probably look up online that I think is rather insightful pertaining to these injustices as well. Anyways, I don't know, this is her actual piece that she wrote. I don't know whether it's the fundamental understanding of the democratic process I gained in elementary school or the fact that I have eyeballs, which allows me to see the disciplinary proceedings against Robo as the farce that they are. The impeachment, his removal, this disciplinary hearing in which it would seem Jason had inadequate access to counsel or opportunity for defense/support, all, quote, conveniently timed. I'm not going to pretend my comments are unbiased. I know Jason personally, admires activism, and consider him a friend. I voted for him in both elections. I appreciate his integrity and think him courageous to publicly speak his convictions, on and off campus. I consider that all the aforementioned disciplinary actions invalid and politically motivated. I'll just say that right up front. So if you'd like an impartial analysis of the situation, you might as well stop reading here. This is going to be a public document too, so don't worry about that. Also, I am a virtual nobody. I'm just a graduate student struggling to get through my thesis while earning poverty-level wages and selling myself to the Department of Education via the federal direct loan program, just to pay rent with whatever remains after paying my rising HSU fees and tuition. There is really no particular reason anyone should listen to me, some would say. Furthermore, I don't participate in student government. I don't know most of the key players. I wouldn't recognize Steve Butler or Randy Darnell Burke if I passed them on campus. I don't know Tyler Smith from Granny Smith, but I do possess the requisite rudimentary critical thinking skills to recognize one of those apples is poisoned. According to the Electric Law Library's lexicon, conflict of interest is defined as It refers to a situation when someone such as a lawyer or public official has competing professional or personal obligations or personal or financial interests that would make it difficult to fulfill his duties fairly. End the definition. And so in the interest of said fairness, let me also direct attention, just go over that part, that kind of reiterates. Anyways, appointed by someone with an overt anyone but robo agenda, speaking on Tyler, I believe, assisting in the drafting and oversight of Jason's impeachment, testifying against Jason at his disciplinary hearing, and serving on the elections committee. Tyler Smith, let me speak plainly, you, sir, are, quote, conflict of interest, quote, end quote, defined. Because you either do not see it or will not admit that fact voluminously speaks to your character or lack thereof, but by no means negates your ethical obligation to recuse yourself from any electoral issues concerning Robo. For at this moment, your involvement reeks of impropriety. And that's the end of my public comments.
Tony Snow, and then Dina, and then yeah.
I'm actually hoping to get information. After this public comment and you folks start to debate the action item, will there be more time for a public comment on that as well, or no?
Can I just say something real quick? I don't have all night to be here. I think this is very important, and I want to hear everybody's concerns, and I am ready to voice my concerns. But I don't have all night, so I would ask people to be concise and to get to the point, so we can move through this.
Maybe you'll be removed. You don't have to worry about being here.
Tony, then I would like to make a public comment now. Then I just want to remind folks that of the board dealing with this issue that's currently being looked at, Jason's complaint, that what was looked at was the several things, and not just Jason's removal for a revote. It not only had to deal with Jason's removal, but also the fact that some students' voices wouldn't be heard. And so in terms of fairness, that was one of the things looked at. Also, one of the things looked at was that there were some complications with the voting system in the early stages, which allowed for double voting to occur. So when folks went to write in for Sophia Pereira, they actually couldn't unclick any other candidate's name, what could have possibly been behind. So I think that the best case for this problem is to allow for democracy to occur, which is happening right now in this revote, and allowing for students to have their voices heard, especially those who may have voted for Jason Robo, but their voices may not have been heard and have had the chance to recast their votes. Thank you.
Regarding Robo's violation complaint, the one that has to do with the plurality revoting. Is it 13-1? Plurality and runoff elections.
You're talking about the majority thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm saying if nobody gets majority. 1301, right? 1301. Again, I'd like to reiterate, because I think it's a very important point, that if a runoff election was going to be held, it would be between Jason and Luke. When Jason was deemed ineligible, when Robo would have been deemed ineligible before the runoff election occurred, it should have been between Luke and Crystal. The fact that you're having a revote is not only completely against the democratic process, but completely undermines the wishes of the student government, because somebody lost and they're running again. And that's not the way it goes in a democracy. If you lose, you lose. I'm sorry, it sucks, but you lost. You got the least amount of votes. Like, there should be no revote. There should be a runoff. There should be no write-in section. You're undermining, like, the revote is undermining the democratic process and undermining the wishes of the government, of the AS body.
Thank you. Sorry, Ryan.
Sure. I'll make this concise because, again, you did mention that it was going to be 90-second public comment at the beginning of this meeting, so I'll try to follow that. I just want to make this comment on behalf of myself about the email that was sent out in regards to the same issues that are in Jason's thing. It's important, again, that public comment be made by a person on behalf of themselves, and that was my major objection to Jason making a comment after me, because in Gloria Merrill, I should be able to make a comment on behalf of myself. And that's what this is about, not on behalf of what other people say. So, again, I did call for this meeting to take place in response to that. In my own email, I did say that I think there was a slight misinterpretation of what it means to address complaints, which is part of what Jason brought up. The example that I gave in that email was that if I'm a candidate and I have a complaint, it's up to this body to try to deal with it informally if they can. However, if this body can't deal with it informally, as it was unable to, then this meeting takes place. And that's essentially what I called for in that email, and I did that specifically because of the problems as I saw it in regards to upholding how complaints are dealt with the code, and in addition to counselors and executives that came up to me and showed that they were worried. That was the point of my email, and I just wanted to make sure that that sentiment was stressed on behalf of my own self and wasn't taken out of context. And with that,
Okay. Jesse was next.
Yeah, I said 2 quick things. That is true. I think that we are public officials, and all of our documentation is public record. What Ryan said is true about the intention of that email. We just wanted this process to happen, which is happening. But we at AS oftentimes, if someone doesn't, feels a certain way about an issue, they'll have their friend come read a letter in support or opposition of it, so it's not very uncommon. The thing that I would like to question is I'm wondering why one individual in the room has said that there were problems on WebReg with voting. Why would a student know anything about what happens on WebReg and what happens with the vote? To me, I think that, again, shows that several people are getting information that other students don't have. And to be quite frank, it extremely concerns me that our student elections are held on WebReg, which is owned by the school, which is easily manipulated. So the fact that a student is here talking about, oh, well, there was problems and
I can give you a point of information to just answer that question.
It wouldn't be a point of information, and I would be happy to hear a response to it, but it's extremely problematic that a student that's here contributing as an individual is talking about what's going on in WebReg over an extremely contested election.
Okay.
So please feel free to fill me in.
Tony contacted me and said, I had a friend who went online to vote for WebReg. He clicked on a dot of somebody to try and read the voter's guide of them, and then tried to unclick, and he wasn't able to unclick that person. He then proceeded to write in Sophia's name. I don't know who exactly this person is, but that was the problem that was presented to me. It was the fact that there can't be an unclicking of a bubble, and then to remove it, and then to write in. So that was what he was referencing specifically.
Right, so shouldn't all students be able to know that there was some type of problem regarding a contentious election? Or is that just privy to certain people who are working on an individual's campaign?
No,
it was
open information.
It was actually open information. I submitted it to Keith right away once I heard the complaint brought to me from someone who supported a candidate that I also support, and it's very open who I support. But I also wanted to note that there is not unprecedented to have a revote. Just 2 years ago, the Student Affairs Vice President's race had a revote because on some of the when folks went to vote, one of the names wasn't bold, either it wasn't bold or it wasn't bold, so it caused for a revote to occur. The fact that maybe in the possibility that double votes occurred, and especially when the second place was only 9 votes away, I think, my personal obvious bias, but I would think, and the board happened to agree, that it would cause concern for fairness and did in fact lead to a revote. And I thank you for listening.
Any further public comments on Jason's official complaints before he discusses them? Seeing none, Jason, please feel free to address each complaint as it needs to be addressed, but to avoid constant conversation about and for unnecessary conversation on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we might have some conflict on what's necessary, but I hope that we do this smoothly. I would like to focus primarily at first on the conflict of interest policy and the issue of Tyler Smith's presence here today. And so I'd like to reiterate, he was nominated by President Terra Rentz and appointed, and then as primary author of drafting and subsequently author of the articles of impeachment themselves, and being good friends with Terra, which is visible on the MySpace, as I said, testifying against me at the hearing the day before the election as well. I mean, how could somebody not see any kind of a conflict with such a high level of involvement in a candidate's candidacy? And I mean, completely arbitrarily, imposed as well. But this position on the Elections Commission, effectively in the capacity in which Tyler's been functioning and making motions and having an opinion, has primarily seemed to have been a means of campaigning against myself. And this is a no-brainer, I think, of a conflict of interest. If you don't see it, then I don't know, maybe you wear a helmet or something. I'm not sure. So, nowhere does it say. I'll just move on.
Jason, please don't insult people.
Seriously,
let's keep this
Alright, sorry.
chivalrous.
So maybe in the mood of the having the ability to read thing I read about Shannon and such. But anyways, so the election commissioner, I want to reiterate as well, and this is what I hope to seek before you guys decide what to do with these fraudulent elections, is that in Code 5.03 it says that Keith has the authority to remove anyone on the commission whose actions seek to improperly affect the outcome of the election, which Tyler has seemed to have apparently done, because he made a motion for an illegitimate action. And that's what's being contested, is primarily Tyler's actions. So I think that that's pretty crucial that we talk about this. And could somebody read Elections Code section 17.12? Because I don't have a code on there.
17.2. A two-thirds vote of the Elections Commission members present may disqualify a candidate or invalidate all or any portion of the election within its jurisdiction when a hearing by the Election Commission has shown that sufficient evidence exists that violations of the Elections Code may have significantly affected the outcome of the election.
So a two-thirds vote to remove me was never made. It was just a memo kicked down from dictator Stephen Butler's office, and that's not an insult, that's the truth. And so this two-third vote for removal never occurred. And so that Tyler's preliminary motion to rehold this election without me, besides the conflict of interest, it didn't even meet the criteria by which it should have been done. And so, and the commissioner should have immediately addressed these issues as they arise, not waited. I'm really disappointed that we've had to wait almost a week to address this, when the first day, was it Friday evening, Luke sent in the first complaint, and I got mine in Sunday night. There are multiple ones that we've all already talked about, and then there's been outcry from within the AS as well. And so, I mean, that doesn't exactly pertain to Tyler's actions, but then the outcome of those actions are what's as well being contested. And so I think the motivating, or the explanation and motivating factor for this is that there is a very blatant conflict of interest. And so I urge you to address this and to remove Tyler from this board and to no longer allow him to infect this with his vile, horrible judgment. It is not wanted in this government. And if the community knew about it, this is my judgment as well. I mean, if you don't want to echo it, then that's your own prerogative. But, I mean, this needs to be talked about. And if this was out in the public community, then I'm sure people would be outraged just about that component alone. So I'm going to move on beyond the Tyler thing, and I also want to reiterate, I ask you, when you get a chance, after I'm done, did you talk about that issue first? And then clear up why you believe that he should stay. Because I think that's really the question. Why should he still be here? And why was that not a conflict of interest in his capacity in which he functioned? So, moving on, Election Code Section 4.10, could you please read that?
Can I provide you with a...
No, I think everybody needs to hear it, not just me.
Well, I mean, you can read it out loud.
Oh, yeah, if you want me to read it, sure, why not?
I can read it.
You got it?
The Elections Commission shall consist of the Elections Commissioner, 3 members appointed by the AS President, and 2 members appointed by the Legislative Vice President. The AS General Manager or designee shall serve as an advisor to the Commission.
And that's 4.10?
Yes.
No. 01.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not right.
4.10. The Commissioner shall supervise an orderly voting process and a prompt and accurate tallying of results.
Okay, so I would like it to be noted in the public right now and by the board or the commission that nowhere does it say anything about concealing vote totals or anything about ineligibility possible being declared during the election and the tallying process. So I think that's pretty apparent. I'd like to refer now to the AS Constitution, Article 7, Section C.1. And I guess I mean, just straight up, I mean, you tell me otherwise if I'm wrong, but that talks about the candidates can only be eliminated due to ineligibility in the 3 days following election packet submission, correct?
I'll read that because I don't think paraphrasing is necessary. Specifically, what you're referring to is section C.1. I'll read the whole thing because it's important. Nominations. Executive officers shall be nominated by petition signed by 150 members of the association. AS college-specific representatives shall be nominated by petition signed by 50 members of the association within the college he or she is representing. AS all university representatives shall be nominated by petition signed by 50 members of the association within all university programs. Graduate student representatives shall be nominated by petition signed by 20 members of the association who are graduate students. Petitions for nominations shall be filed with the elections commissioner no less than 14 calendar days, no less than 14 calendar days, not more than 42 calendar days prior to the regular election. The elections commission has 3 school days to rule the eligibility of the candidate after filing, and public notice to the effect that nominations are in order shall be posted in office bulletin boards and shall be published in the school newspaper at least 42 days prior to the election by the Elections Commission.
Alright, so it says in there pretty clearly that ineligibility is supposed to be declared within 3 days, and the deadline for that would be April 10th. Now, what I want to specifically address here is that, and the policy by which this ineligibility is supposed to be, or eligibility or ineligibility is supposed to be decided upon, is the next policy that I outlined. That's Executive Memorandum P07-01, and is called specifically the minimum academic qualifications for student officers. And before getting into too much detail for that, I want to talk about this 3 days, right? 3 days is ample time to check somebody's record. So if I had bad grades, you guys should be able to figure that out. Within that 3-day period, there's really not much else that can transpire. That's a reasonable amount of time to check somebody's academic record. Nowhere in this does it say anything about disciplinary action, the part that I'm about to talk about. But I mean, logic would infer that that 3 days exists to check an academic record. It isn't like an open window by which, things can happen. And then either, it's being arbitrarily extended now, apparently, to be 42 days, it seems, because that goes, or like 44 days, because it went right into the middle of the election in which ineligibility was declared. So this is a massive violation of this section. And then so I want to move forward into Executive Memorandum P07-01. Gail, do you have a copy of this, it seems? Or somebody? Could I?
What part do you want?
I'd just like to see, it's 2 pages, it's not too big. Do you mind passing that out? Thank you.
Can I get that back reading?
Yeah, definitely. And then can I borrow that too again?
This letter?
Yeah, this is the cover letter, which it was presented by. Alright, so this is the cover letter where Keith's name is misspelled. That says, I guess, Butler, you'd think you academic institution, get something right. As of April 23rd, Mr. Robo is out of compliance with Executive Memorandum, what I just cited, and therefore is ineligible to hold student office through spring semester 2009. Now, when again did the election packet filing period end?
April 7th.
All right, and so when this 3 days ended, would have been, sorry, my math is foggy right now.
Thursday the 10th.
Bam. All right, so 10. So this is 2 whole weeks after that window. So therefore, this document should hold absolutely no force. And its very nature is very underhanded and sneaky, which is pretty blatantly clear with my political stance that we need to cut administrators, not academics. And I have never backed down from that. And that's what I believe is the true underlying motive for a lot of this scandal right now. So anyways, I'm going to read this document in its entirety, and I'm sorry if anybody thinks that this is tedious, but I mean we're doing a pretty close analysis, it seems, of these documents, and I think that it's vital in order to hear this, so everybody here can hear there's nothing about disciplinary action in here. Alright, so the title I already said, minimum academic qualifications, so once again reiterate, academic, straight up academic. Effective spring 2007, the following provisions will apply to undergraduate and post-baccalaureate students seeking and holding student government offices and appointments. Now, let me just interject a note here. This is very brand new. This is barely even a year old. So continuing, in addition, at the end of the fall semester 2007, this policy will be revisited to consider increasing the undergraduate minimum GPA to 2.5 for major student government officers. So it's talking again about GPA, not talking about anything else being revised. It's talking about academics. So continuing again, authority is provided in the Chancellor's Office policy, minimum academic qualifications for student office holders, 97. Given representative, fiduciary, legal, and other long-range policy-making responsibilities of student office holders, it is the policy of HSU that student office holders have an obligation to demonstrate academic involvement, achievement, and progress. Academics, once more, I must interject. Continuing on, all student office holders must be matriculated, in parentheses it says, regularly enrolled in a degree-seeking program, in parentheses. At HSU, must maintain a minimum overall grade point average each term as described below. Must be in good standing and must not be on probation of any kind. So this is what, where some of this interpretation that's being applied to myself is coming from. And so it says probation of any kind. I want to reiterate the fact that there are 23 CSU campuses, and we all have all sorts of different kinds of policies. So there are all sorts of different academic probations and such. So, I mean, it could say any probation of any kind, and it's referring to academics as the memo is so aptly titled. And so you've got probation of any kind, and it doesn't speak specifically about any of these other forms of probation, so I believe that it infers that it's talking about the academics as it's so titled. So continuing on, these requirements apply to all elected and appointed positions of associate students of HSU, including student reps, to system-wide and university committees and the University Center Board of Directors, as well as student representative offices within recognized campus clubs and organizations. These requirements are minimum qualifications. Organizations may establish additional requirements provided that the requirements do not discriminate on the basis of race, age, religion, gender, and in parentheses, unless exempt under Title IX, Section 901A, in parentheses, disability, sexual orientation, or national origin. And so I must interject again some points here. It says that, additional requirements may be made. Well, I have never seen a document to supplement this that speaks about disciplinary probation. So this is completely, self-serving interpretation by the administrators, which would apparently, I would say, be fearful of a student leader that, if he won presidency, would walk into that guy's office, Roland Richmond's, with press and make him answer hard-hitting questions and talk about issues that he seems to shy from.
I can direct you to California Code of Regulations, Title V, Section 41301, which can be found at the Humboldt State University Academic Affairs website if you'd like to do some further research on that.
You don't have a copy on that on you?
No.
Alright, I have no idea what's in that, so...
It discusses probation and disciplinary reasons for probation.
Well, if,
It's one such offense that you had to make to be put on that probation.
Well, I don't see that document here right now, and I haven't seen it in the code book, and I haven't seen it in the elections code. So, I mean, if you want to go print one of those up and bring that up and do a recess, then that's fine. But I'd like to continue with my narration of this document. So now it goes into requirements in big bold caps. It says major student government offices. Major student government offices include members of student governing board, e.g. associated students, and semicolon, University Center Board Directors or others with fiduciary responsibilities, parentheses, e.g. other campus auxiliaries, and parentheses, semicolon, and campus representatives to the CSSA, California State Student Association, and or all statewide committees. And so it says now, incumbent requirements, next section. Undergraduate students must earn a minimum of 9 semester units of credit per term while holding office. Undergraduate students must also maintain a minimum HSU cumulative and semester GPA of 2.3. Postbaccalaureate students must earn 6 semester units of credit per term and be enrolled in making satisfactory progress in a degree program while holding office. Postbaccalaureate students must also maintain a postbaccalaureate minimum HSU cumulative and semester GPA of 3.0.
Jason, can I interject? How is this relevant?
I'm
continuing
reading
of
through
the
the
reading.
document in its entirety to
Okay.
show clearly that there is nothing about disciplinary
But
status in here.
did it not just state disciplinary probation and disciplinary?
Where does it say that?
When it says probation of any kind, and probation can be put on for disciplinary status.
I'd appreciate it if you didn't infer your own logic and wait until the end and allow me to make my points, because I've already been making mine. This is not supposed to be a back and forth.
Point of order, incumbent requirements have nothing to do with this.
All right, I'll skip to candidate requirements.
Thank you.
I'm almost there anyways. Undergraduate candidates must maintain a minimum of 9 semester units of credit per term and have a minimum HSU cumulative and semester GPA of 2.3 without running for or being appointed to office. And so I want to interject, I was enrolled in 16 units and my GPA is 3.0, 3.1. Anyways, continuing, major student government office candidates must have successfully completed at least 12 semester units in HSU in the 12 months preceding the semester in which the election is held or appointment takes place. Post-baccalaureate students must maintain 6 semester units of credit per term, have a post-baccalaureate minimum, HSU cumulative, and semester GPA of 3.0, and be enrolled in making satisfactory progress in a degree/credential program while running for office. Undergraduate students are allowed to earn a maximum of 150 cumulative semester units required for a specific baccalaureate degree objective. Post-baccalaureate students are allowed to earn a maximum of 50 cumulative units required for the graduate or credential objective. Students holding over maximum number of cumulative units will not be eligible to run for office. And then in the end it says, there's supposed to be, there's another page for this thing, or is this it? It's supposed to have something for exceptions. Does anybody have that page? There seems to be something missing.
Exceptions is right there.
Here we go. Well, that's kind of weird. No consistency with these documents. This one has completely different
Jason,
something
we
right
made
there.
those copies before the meeting, just for that. We didn't need the exception information.
All right. I think you did.
That was from my own personal.
Exceptions. Under extraordinary circumstances, the campus vice president for student affairs may make an exceptions to the requirements for unit load maximum, allowable units, residency, and GPA. So once again, it's talking about academic components. Unit load, allowable units, residency, which you get after taking a certain amount of units, and GPA, all academic. So heavily throughout the document, it refers primarily only to academics. And the only time that you could, interpret it to do so is when it says probation of any kind, but if you refer to the title of the document, then that's completely taken out of context.
Okay.
So anyways,
Jason,
I'm going to move on.
I'm actually going to say I think the commission has been more than accommodating, and I will set a time limit on you now to finish up the rest of what you want to discuss. And this isn't meant to choke your process, but I think that we need to move forward with this.
I think it is, and I'm going to outcry right now that as Gloria Romero acted, you cannot inhibit somebody's comments to you in order to do damage control. And I feel that I have the most scathing of criticisms for you guys, and that I'm only halfway through. I mean, I'm sorry that took a while to read, but I think that it was necessary, as I stated, to read it to show what exactly that says for everybody in the room. So I'm going to continue. What would you suggest your time limit to be, if you still would do so?
I would ask, in courtesy to everybody else, that you would address your last 6 issues, because I counted them out, in a timely matter of 12 minutes, giving you 2 minutes to address each matter.
Okay. I'll do what I can. So yeah, like I said, the way that this policy is being interpreted by Stephen Butler's office, to wrap up that 1 point, so I'm not trying to do 7 on you, that Stephen Butler is arbitrarily imposing his eligibility interpretation process on you. It's a liberal interpretation, self-serving of that document. Anyways, Elections Code Section 4.11. I mean, are you still going to read any of these, or is that going to take up my 12 minutes?
However you deem necessary.
Well, 4.11, since you won't read it and it'll take up my time, Commissioner should immediately address issues as they arise, and it's pretty outrageous that this has gone on this long. This is actually pretty ridiculous. This should have been done by Tuesday evening, because it said 2 school days. Elections Code Section 5.03 says the election commissioner, let's cover that already. Elections Code Section 10.04, my campaign materials, like I said, they were all knocked down and destroyed and such. And so I think that that's another reason why, there's kind of an election. And then, Tony's claims, if there was something wrong with that, I find those to be valid. But I shouldn't have ever been taken off of the ballot.
Point of clarification, you weren't.
Why was I not on the ballot?
You weren't removed from the ballot. That's not a question here. Please continue.
I don't know what you're talking about. There was a ballot in the second election and I wasn't on it.
This election.
Elections Code Section 10.05 says candidates are responsible for the actions of their campaign committee. And then so I'm referring back again to Crystal Cheney's constituents' actions. And Dina, maybe Dina. Jimmy. Did you ever see anybody doing that old Crystal Cheney, anybody but Robo is going to destroy the AS thing? I forgot.
Yeah, sure. They were actually trying to rally people to this cry.
Yeah, because I've had multiple people in my clubs, Normal and 9/11 Truth, had people approach them trying to get their signatures, and they definitely talked to the wrong person. And one of those was Abby Haber and Anna, I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, but they're Normal, and then they were approached, and it was a young Asian woman, and when she pitched to them, Jason's destroying the AS, get Crystal on the ballot so we can get rid of Robo. And they said, we already gave our hearts to Robo, and then the girl short-circuited and didn't know what to do, and then they said, hey, take a walk, and then the girl reluctantly walked away. Anyways, Elections Code Section 10.07, university staff, back to this again, the administration, in all honesty, you guys are set up to be ineffective and not know what the hell's going on and which way's up, so that way that you're dependent upon administrative insight for things that you do not see properly. And so it's already set up, I think, the whole thing's rigged so that you rely on that interference as a necessary component for conducting an election, which in itself is flawed. Continuing on. But yeah, and then there were other things, so like Rachel Rodriguez and Tyler Smith, I think, is an illegal negative endorsement towards myself, like towards other candidates, that's inappropriate. I've been previously impeached and told that I use my title and abuse it to like say all sorts of things, but this is a pretty apparent double standard here, that when they say things, they didn't do the same thing that I did, because they're not Robo. I've been thoroughly demonized, I feel. Also, it seems perhaps by this commission as well as the AS body, which this derived from, so that's flawed in itself. And then Terra Rentz, I'd like to defer a moment to Dina, because Dina has been eloquently stated to me as she was a witness to Terra Rentz, the president, the most ridiculous, I think, of errors by the AS to interfere in the campaign, and I'll let her make her piece real quick.
I find it slightly counterproductive and maybe mildly slanderous when two members of AS, one being the president, the other being Carrie, whose name I can't remember.
Shaden.
Is that her last name? Okay. Were sitting down next to me, and Carrie's response was, I need to go around and tell everybody not to vote for Robo because he's going to ruin AS. And Terry's response back was, you can't say that directly because that'll get you in trouble, but here's how you can go around the slandering. You say it like this, and instructed her on how to properly get her point explicitly across without being able to get in direct trouble. And I find that offensive. I mean, if we're supposed to be upholding the code, we're supposed to be upholding the code and not finding ways to fudge it, especially being the president of AS. And that happened in front of me the day of the debate when Carrie came and sat down right next to me afterwards, and Carrie came right back and was sitting down, kneeling on the ground. That's what happened.
And I also want to refer back to, Jesse's comments earlier about how a month before the election that he was, told about the plans already to sabotage my candidacy, and that the timing didn't work out exactly as they planned. So please keep those in mind as well while viewing my complaint, especially. And then, so Stephen Butler, back on this hearing, I mean, it was a surrogate in order to impose administrative will. And so when I asked Stephen Butler, because they were giving me all these 2,000-page documents and telling me to read these policies and things like that, he said, quote, we don't have the luxury of time, and then he said, quote, to just get it done. And then so they imposed a hearing. They didn't allow me to provide myself adequate legal counsel. I think that is very, very important to keep in mind in this matter, that, a disciplinary hearing which granted this ineligibility that was arbitrarily imposed was done in an underhand, sneaky manner in which I was not able to adequately defend myself. I did not choose that hearing date. That date was set up to fulfill the needs of administrators, which is an undue influence in this election under 10.07, which I'm still talking about. And then also the fact that it was done during the Sacramento protest. As I said, I lost my deposit. I really wanted to go, but I wanted to sit there in a hearing. And I have an audio recording I could submit to the record if you'd like it of various things that were brought up during that hearing that were very unjust. And I have a copy of, oh man, I don't have that on me right now.
I'd like to remind you that we're not here to determine anything about your hearing.
I'm talking about the nature of my ineligibility being declared and the fact that that was administrative interference under 10.07, so I feel your point, though well taken, is not valid right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so Stephen Butler's office has definitely had its own agenda, and that was being fulfilled by such means. And I was kind of sidetracked, so I just kind of lost my fluidity in that point. But I'll move on to Elections Code Section 17.12, and that the necessary conditions for the commission to disqualify a candidate says nothing of administrative oversight beyond the 3-day period previously outlined. So, I mean, this is all just completely invalid. Every action that's been taken is sought to validate this administration's will being imposed upon you. And I'm sorry if you don't want to think this way, but as long as you act upon the assumption that that document that says I'm ineligible for this election and then did it outside that process, as long as you continue to persist with such an action, that you are a puppet and that you are serving needs that are not conducive to the student body. And so, I mean, this election, without me on the ballot, is invalid. And a runoff election is the course of action as outlined in Section 13.01, which I do include here, which is really important. I'd like to actually be read, please.
13.01?
Yes.
It states, as per Article 12 of the Associated Students' Constitution, council representatives shall be elected on a plurality basis. Executive officers must receive a majority of the ballot cast for that office. In the event of a tie, or if a candidate for executive office fails to receive the required majority, a runoff election shall be held for the two candidates with the highest vote total.
And I want. All right. So I mean, it says in there pretty much you're supposed to do a runoff. So I'm not even going to go on that. You said it very finely, as it's written, and you should follow. But I want to jump back actually to the minimum academic qualifications because I have a very interesting point to be made, and that's I know Shannon Taylor actually was director of an AS program called Operation U-Turn last year, and she had a student that didn't make grades in the fall semester, so continuing in the spring, that student had to step down. She said, well, how can you do this? Because she was already installed for the year. And it's like, oh, well, here's the policy. And then she read the policy, and then realizing that as director, she was on financial aid probation. Well, it's another probation that's not mentioned in that policy that's titled academic qualifications. And then she said, well, does this mean that I'm not, because it says probationary time? It's like, no, that's academic. And so this is coming from Student Affairs Office. So you can see the double standard here being applied to serve ulterior motives. And so I have a few comments to make before I, yield the floor. And I think I got like 3 or 4 minutes left. I think it's sad that the best that you guys can do as a counterpoint so far has been to, to cite Gloria Romero Act and hide behind it, and also to say something about the code saying that your word is final, which it isn't if it isn't adhering to the integrity of the code. Code doesn't exist to bow to administrative will, but to preserve the democratic process for the students. And I want to reiterate again, you guys are made to be ineffective to create dependence on administrative oversight, and that you're just validating Butler's bullshit.
Please refrain from swearing.
Well, that's not on the code. I'm sorry if that bothers you if you're a good Christian, but I'm going to continue. Did entertain expedited appeal. Butler talked about my appeal in this room a week ago. And he said that he would expedite my appeal. And paradoxically, you guys interpreted the policy doesn't say anything about disciplinary status to say that it didn't say anything about appealing disciplinary status. And so that's pretty ridiculous and contradictory in itself. And then I was denied my right to appeal. As SVP, I know for certain that students have been on disciplinary probation during either election or for, continuation of the AS academic or the academic year at school, and that they were allowed an appeal for disciplinary actions. And so I was denied a right that was previously granted, which was already oversight that's arbitrarily formed. And so by its very nature, this system is rigged. And we may not have, I may not have been always cordial at all points and appealed to everybody in the community, but the vote should have been decided not by that resentment, but by the democratic process. And so, and I feel that this maybe is a waste of, these two candidates' time if there should have been a runoff. But then again, I do defer to the fact that if there was an electronic error, that should have been addressed, but I shouldn't have been taken off. But your hypocrisy right now, as right now, is so vast. And so my appeal is denied. This probation is nothing about financial aid or disciplinary. And this election is garbage. And so the Election Commission should have in detail explain the revote to the campus community, I feel, and that's another failure perhaps. And I'm going to stop there because I'm going to just get really upset. But I really hope that you guys start to look at this. Because if you don't talk about this and any of these points and the valid nature of them, then I think it's going to show blatantly clear the corruption on this campus that permeates to this level. And that this AS next year, you're going to absolutely cripple beyond the capacity which has already been crippled by my illegitimate impeachment and other things of the sort, which the conflict of interest, I believe, is very closely tied to.
Thank you. I'm actually going to call another recess, 3-minute recess. Use the restroom, drink water, and then we'll come back and we will, as the commission, address all complaints made. following through, looking at paper and saying, okay, section 3.01, let's address this one. And then that's how we'll carry on from that time out. So I think you guys have had ample time to express your concern, and I appreciate all your concern. I do hope you feel you're being listened to, and I hope that when we return that you guys will listen to us and we can come to a good conclusion. So we'll reconvene at 7:59.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Will?
With what?
With the anybody but Robo. It was totally me.
Oh, that's fine. I don't even really use MySpace or Facebook, so really, whatever you guys forward to me,
No, I didn't forward
probably
it to
stays on
anybody.
there.
That's the funny thing. That's just on my page. Damn straight I did. I was gonna have t-shirts and buttons. Oh, Nick, you've been missing out on so much. Yeah.
Good, how are you?
Not better.
Good. I'm glad.
I am missing out on a lot. I'm trying to catch up right now. Oh, no good.
Plenty of time.
Yeah. I'm behind. I'm working on it.
I'm glad you're back.
Projectors without constant supervision of club advisor, which would be the fault.
What's up, Rachel?
Nothing much.
Lives in the know, that's fucking stupid.
Gonna get home.
So yeah,
I'm hungry.
I kind of grudgingly held on to the reservation.
I know you guys are pretending that, oh, it's okay that Tyler and Tara and Crystal and Rob and Joan are all friends and hang out. So you can pretend that we're a room full of people, but this is some democratic process and that you guys are just doing it by the code. Nothing is coming from the code. These are the lines.
Hey, Jesse, sue us. Okay? You guys such a problem?
You're gone.
Sue us.
You're gone.
Do you
You're about to
have
graduate,
internet?
and it's a done deal.
Could I borrow
Oh,
it
you're
from my
gone.
party?
It's over, so it doesn't matter. It does not matter how it turns out, because y'all are gone.
If it doesn't matter, then what are you doing?
How about this?
It's only got a little
How
bit of
about
battery
this?
left for
She
about
sent
10
us
minutes.
an email. She sent us an email telling people not to contact Jason's attorney, using her job, influencing people, which is totally wrong.
Deal with those issues.
You slandered people. You've had stuff stolen out of my
As
office.
AS Terra Rentz to inform members of AS on ways they can get
What's up, Rachel?
around
What are you doing this weekend?
the Slander's campaign clause.
I don't know.
You and Harry were sitting in front, right next to me when you did that, Tara. The day of the debate, Harry said, and I quote, I need to tell people not to vote for Robo. I need to get out there and tell everybody not to vote for Robo. And he already said,
There's a lot of things that fall about the highway permits because normally piss off the university. It's not like the boys, blowing rich over the HSU pot. A reasonable person.
Until 5:30 Monday, Thursday, and Friday until 5.
Stephen Butler.
We took it down and they changed the size of the
Amber.
Yeah. They told us a month before.
We were out cleaning the freeway, this fucking sign isn't even on.
It's against her. Either no one has ever read her before.
That one, I've read it.
Do you want me to address this?
I'm going to bring this up in the meeting and I didn't want to like
Okay, Jesse, just flip through that one. Okay, so we're both going to agree that we're going to interpret it differently so that I'm guessing all the
This is very explicit. Use a disregard our entire code. Here's one.
He'll be able to send it.
Don't ask Nikki to run. There's one.
Wait on that, bro.
It was great.
Nikki was asked to run by our general manager, which is grounds for being fired.
Everybody took
So if
me
you guys
out
want to lie about all these things that are going on here, act like these aren't the deals that are
Can I
going on.
ask you what you guys
As in you, Joan, Steven, yeah.
Okay, what did I
You're sitting here saying that this is something that should supersede our government code, disregarding our code, our constitution, pretending that staff should be an office holder and doesn't sit around. I've read all this. You've taken one little thing and trying to run it. You guys are violating Florida Romero, which is a misdemeanor, which is on tape. You're violating Florida Romero, which is a misdemeanor, which is on tape. You're the person who's responsible right now, and I noticed that since everyone has talked about all the propaganda that's been going on about how Stephen and Joan,
You can't say that because that's a defender's complaint. But what you can do is get around it like this. I don't understand.
Just because I
in front of me.
I'm actually
in front of me. You guys are both members of AS.
we're the ones.
And if I have a person,
We're the
then
ones.
I'm trying
So,
to.
good luck with having this be a good foundation. When you totally let it be known.
She wasn't asking you for your advice. She was telling you what she was doing. And then you turned out and you said, no, don't do that. Do it this way so you can't get in trouble doing it.
well, you know what? That's, I hate to break it to you, but that's important.
I have respect for the students. The students. That's
How to
all
get
I'm
around the
saying.
rules? As AS president,
You
you're
thought-
telling people how to get around code?
You're
You're AS president above being the student.
You guys are totally doing things inappropriate. You're violating the law, and then you're trying to spin it around. So you guys can keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, but I
All
will
that
hold
stuff
code
is
and find ways
you
to
guys
keep
have
it.
obviously done things that are not according to
Dude, that was exactly what you were doing. You
the
said
rules of this organization have blatantly violated the law.
But I should be sitting up there.
because you're out.
You know what? That's right. I am out. That's what I was doing. To see a nice, strong,